Once you've had the chance to log in, you'll probably be familiar with this window. You'll also be probably aware that we've introduced the new advanced scorecards, which is a bit different than our standard scorecard setup from previous times, where it was kind of at the workspace level. It now is at the settings level. So how I would get here is from the bottom left-hand corner, clicking that circle, going to settings, uncollapsing this, and then selecting scorecards. So bit of a different view. So I'll go over everything in a bit more detail just to clarify where things live now and how they work. So at the top here, we have these three tabs, scorecards being the scorecards that we have set up, categories being the collective of all of our categories that we have set up. And again, we can review some more data around that in a second. And then root causes. In the past, you would build root causes under each category specifically, but now we can have them all in one place, and then we can apply them to different categories as we begin to build out our categories and scorecards. So if I look at my scorecards that I have here, I can use the search function to find the scorecard as I begin to build more out. If I uncollapse this, I'll have some more details here. So if you're ever unsure about what automatic scoring with AutoQA is, you can review this. We can also toggle a few different filters to see, which scorecards we want to look at. So if at any point in time we want to look at older scorecards or maybe a variety of scorecards, these can be helpful to filter through. When we look at the scorecard itself, we'll be able to see how many categories it has. If we hover over, you'll also see which categories those are, the workspaces which they are associated with, status, and then when it was last updated. The three dots will allow us to edit the scorecard, duplicate it, mark it as inactive, or delete it. And if I want to build out a new scorecard or category, I would simply click the Create button at the top right-hand corner. So let's go ahead and build out a scorecard, and then we can dive deeper into building out a specific category. So with the scorecard, we now have the ability to apply it to various workspaces, which is ultimately more scalable in the long term as your business grows. And perhaps as you build out different workspaces. So right here, we'll be able to toggle whether this particular scorecard applies to all workspaces or just specific sets of workspaces. We'll also be able to define which workspaces have AutoQA enabled. So something to keep in mind here if that's something you'd come back to. And then it's a bit tricky, but naming the scorecard will just be up here. So if I wanted to call this new main scorecard, I'll go ahead and just click up here and then give it a name. Now, as I start building out my scorecard, I'll have the ability to save this as a draft at any point in time. If for any reason I want to come back to building out the scorecard, that's possible now. And then I'll be able to start building out the scorecard's skeleton, I guess. So group sections is things like soft skills, maybe. And then another one could be product knowledge. And we might even have a part about compliance. All that for us to maybe organize things a bit better. Now, as I kind of have the format of the scorecard built out, I can now begin to add categories under each one of these group sections. I can do it from here, or I can simply click the Add Category button here. So as I click Add Category, I'll be able to select from a drop-down of categories that are pre-built. And then here is where I, for example, set up the AutoQA. So if I wanted to add a closing category, I'd go ahead and select closing. Where it applies, the rating scale, so either thumbs up or thumbs down, as well as a not applicable option if that's something I want. And then I'll be able to define the weighting on a percentage scale. So again, this will be out of 100. So for now, we'll keep it at maybe 10, or let's just say 15. And then this will give me the total weighting as well at the top right-hand corner. So you'll see this begin to add up as I create more categories. If this is a critical category, which means that if this category is failed on the entire scorecard, if this category is failed, the entire scorecard fails, that's where we would define that. We can also choose to now fail the group only. So maybe we don't want the entire scorecard to be failed, only this particular group of soft skills. So if that's the case, we would select this only. And then therefore, if the agent fails the closing category, they would only fail the soft skills if I select the group only. I can also now decide to show the scorecard under specific and certain conditions. So if, for example, I only wanted this scorecard to appear on maybe Zendesk sourced conversations, that's where I could do that, or from the browser extension, or maybe I wanted only chats or emails or specific help desk tags. That's where I can define this as well. So again, we can get a bit more granular with how our scorecards appear and where they appear. And that can be helpful if you'd like to use a specific scorecard for a specific set of conversation channels, as well as other configurations here that we can use, such as CSAT. And then we have the root causes. So again, as I showed you earlier, the root causes live at the main section where we have all of them that we can look at. But then as I begin to build out my root causes, I can add them into my categories to create a further elaboration for my agents on why they scored positively or why they scored negatively. So here I can click into this little text box and then begin to select from my list of root causes. So maybe, for closing, I can maybe say, hey, the reason why they, didn't do well on it is because they didn't get acknowledgement from the customer, maybe emoji overuse or empathy too low. And then you could see them begin to populate in this little area. Now, maybe for positive root causes, I just want to leave it as is, but I could add positive root causes as well. But typically, I'd say for negative grades, it's good to provide root causes because then you're able to provide the agent with some enablement and some feedback around why they scored negatively on that particular category. The other option we can toggle on, and what that does is it does give a comment field for the reviewer to provide an open-ended answer when it comes to the feedback on the root cause. So that's something we can do. And then we can also allow this option, which gives the reviewer the ability to select multiple root causes. Once we're happy with this category and how it's set up, we can go ahead and click apply. Now we can see it populate into here. And this exclamation mark lets me know that this particular category, if failed, will fail this group only. So the soft skills. And I can kind of begin to populate here with other categories and then build this out accordingly. So as you can see, this is only worth 10. Therefore, collectively, there are 25 out of the entire scorecard. And then let's just say, again, product knowledge, I begin to add additional categories, maybe worth 20. You can see the cumulative total weight at the top here. And ideally, now we want it to be out of 100. But again, you can kind of work this to different ratios. But again, a lot simpler than what it was with the point percentages or the point scale. And now it's simply a percentage scale. So as we begin to build out our scorecard, this is what it would begin to look like. And now I can just maybe save this as a draft and come back to it later. Now, what I wanted to cover is diving deeper into building a category. So let's go ahead and click create at the top right-hand corner again, and then create category. So besides the fact that we can build out these manual categories, we can now also do prompt-based AutoQA. And I'm not sure why it's disabled right now. Oh, it's because we've reached the limit. So I'll talk about this in a second, and maybe I'll delete one and then cover this again in a sec. So with manual categories, fairly straightforward. We give the category a name, so maybe compliance, a description, and then when this category comes up on the scorecard, it will need to be manually reviewed by our reviewer. Now, the other option we have here is exact text match. So what this would be is whenever a specific word is mentioned or phrase, that will flag to the AutoQA, whether that's positive or negative, and then let us know, or let the AutoQA know, and it would grade it automatically. So let's just say maybe, yeah, sure, let's say compliance again. And then whenever the agent says, can I let you know this conversation is being recorded? Every time the agent says this, it will score positively. And if they don't, we can decide whether that scores negatively or just no score at all. We can also add conditions if we'd like to maybe add a does not contain configuration as well. And then we can also add additional rows of other phrases that the agent can use in order to greet the customer, perhaps comply with what our requirements are. So that's something to keep in mind. And this way you can personalize the AutoQA a bit more. and then therefore you'll have another layer of personalization to the AutoQA, which gives it the ability to pick up on certain things that are most important to you. Sorry, I see something in the chat. I'll come back to the questions later on, so I'm gonna hang on for now. But yeah, so this will be where you customize that. And then again, the prompt-based AutoQA is something I want to go over. So let's go ahead and maybe delete a category and then come back here so I can show you what this looks like when I begin to build it out. So let's go ahead and see any prompt-based categories that I have maybe, and then let's see. Or maybe to simplify this, let's take a look here. So category, let's find the prompt-based one here. So maybe avoiding digressions. Let's go ahead and delete this for now, just so I can show you what it looks like to be building it out. Cool. So now when I click create category, I have the prompt-based ability. So again, now we can essentially tailor these categories with prompts to best meet our needs when it comes to the AutoQA's grading. So again, we would give it a name. And if for any reason we can't come up with a name for this particular category and we need some inspiration, that's completely fine. What I would do then, click more prompts in the bottom right-hand corner here of the prompt section. And then I'd be able to see a list of options that I can work with to not only help me build out these prompts, but maybe gather some inspiration on what it is I could build out when it comes to prompting the AutoQA. So maybe again, we're sticking on the topic of compliance. Maybe tax compliance is something we want to do. So did the agent accurately discuss tax regulations such as US sales tax and the EU value added tax, et cetera, et cetera? Use this prompt. We have up to 300 characters where we can elaborate further if we want to add more context around our business needs. When it comes to, say, tax compliance, that can be helpful in formulating the prompt. As we scroll down a bit further, we'll be able to set up a scoring scale to define the criteria for the scorecards. So again, we can also add detailed answers for our prompt. And again, that's where we do this here, up to 128 characters. So this is where, you can get a bit more creative with some of the categories you want to build out using the prompting. So this can be a lot of fun and can be very helpful to go beyond the standard categories that we have for AutoQA and come up with new ways for the AutoQA to pick up on how your conversations are graded and save your reviewers a lot of time ultimately. So that's building out the new custom AutoQA categories and the new advanced scorecards. Again, you'd find this under settings and then uncollapsing this and then scorecards, and this is where you'd be building it out. Another thing I want to also mention while we're on the topic of scorecards and the AutoQA is under settings now, which lives here, we can decide if we want to use emojis instead of numbers, and this is all in one place now, as in the past it was somewhere else. So we can define this. If for any reason we prefer to use numbers, we would toggle this off. But again, emojis keep it kind of fun and simple when it comes to the grading and reviewing process. We can also allow people to skip categories. So for example, if a reviewer is going through an entire scorecard and they don't complete the entire scorecard, toggling this on will allow them to submit a review that's incomplete. But if we would like to avoid this, we would simply check this off. Now, with this in mind, we could also apply this to all categories or specify for each category in this scorecard setup. So again, we have a lot more personalization and granularity when it comes to how we want these scorecards set up, especially with skipping categories. So something to keep in mind here when it comes to the advanced scorecards. And then here, just would give you kind of a quick overview as to the changes as well as more resources if you'd like to dive deeper into that. Cool. So that's our scorecards in its current state. And then I want to dive into Spotlight, which is another helpful way to cover different areas and customize the AI to pick up on more critical conversations or more critical bits of sentiment that we want to ultimately filter by or take a deeper look at in general. So if you're not already familiar, when you are looking at your conversation, so I'll quickly show you here when we open up a conversation. And when we look at the feedback section of the conversation, we're able to see a spotlight section, which gives us indicators on sentiment. So right here, this little button. Under feedback, we'll see the spotlight active with the little AI hologram again. where it's given us an idea that churn risk has been identified, an outlier has been detected, negative sentiment, and potentially knowledge gap. So these are all pre-configured. However, what we can do now is under Spotlight. So again, how I got here was settings, I'm collapsing this, and then Spotlight. We can now build out these custom spotlights that can pick up on specific things that we want to maybe take a closer look at. So let's just say we wanted a better idea on competitor insights. So whenever one of our competitors is mentioned to our agents, we can begin to flag these conversations and pick up on them so that we can not only filter for them, but have an idea of how often they're coming up, and maybe, take a closer look as we need to. So we'll give this insight a name, such as competitor insights. Under insight type, we'll be able to define whether that's a neutral, negative, or positive insight. So again, we can configure insights that aren't just neutral or negative. And then we can apply this rule to either all conversations or specific conversations. So maybe we want to pick up on competitor insights when it comes to just chats, that we can define here. So maybe source type, and then go from there. But for now, we'll keep it at all conversations. So now what this does is if the client message, so let's just say the customer message, contains any of these words, it will flag to me as this competitor insights spotlight. So I can also decide that this comes up when an agent says it, or any message in general that comes up. So again, a bit more customization when it comes to how you want to define this, either with the client message, agent message, or any message in general. And again, this can differentiate based on the spotlight that we're creating. And again, we can add additional rows for the names of our competitors here if we want them to be flagged every time. And let's just say other ones come up over time, we can simply come back here and add those as they develop. Something to keep in mind, and again, adds more personalization to the ability you can have when it comes to picking up on these critical conversations. Again, knowledge gap could be another one. So not just when it comes to competitor insights. So if you catch, the agent using or any of these words here particularly, like I'm not sure, this will flag to us that perhaps there's a knowledge gap within the conversation, and therefore we can find all conversations that have a knowledge gap ultimately using our filters. So this can be really, really helpful, again, to personalize the AI and figure out where we're lacking, where we can perhaps create more enablement and potentially training. So now that we've covered spotlights, I want to cover insights. So insights are fairly similar to spotlights, but we can get there by clicking the conversations tab, and then we'll uncollapse this here quickly. And in the top right-hand or top left-hand corner, we'll have this insights button. Now with insights, we can begin to find conversations as simply as finding it by ID. So maybe you're looking for a specific conversation that came in from Zendesk and you have the ID, you'd simply type it in here and that would, give you the ability to find it. However, we can also get more granular with our visualization and find conversations that way as well. So we have a few date ranges we can define up here, but for now, we'll just work with the last 30 days. But then we can begin to look into here and then click into it if we want to find this specific set of conversations. So if we want to rule out any specific filter, we can also do this here to begin to find a bit more granular bits of data. And then as we get into it, we would simply find the conversations on the right-hand side here. If at any point in time I do want to click into a conversation, I can simply do that. And then it would take me to the typical review flow that you're familiar with, and then go through that with my conversation review. Now, another thing with insights is I do want to point out you can also use these drop downs to find specific areas that you can choose to collapse or uncollapse. And again, that would apply on the visualization. But all that said, it's a very useful way to come back to finding conversations. And again, specifically by ID, as oftentimes you'll be looking for a specific conversation. So this is where you'd be doing that. So that's our insights. Now, the next thing I want to cover is bot QA. If you are using bots to handle the preliminary parts of your conversation, we can begin to look at not only reviewing those bots, if that's something we want to do, but figuring out what those conversations look like to begin with. Now, to keep this simple, I've created a filter that does have bots. and therefore we can use this filter to find those bot conversations. Now, how I would do that if I wanted to build it out from scratch, I'd simply click the plus button and then find the particular participant to be a bot, and then I would say select it, and then I'd find the conversations where a bot is present. But since I've already built out this filter, let's go ahead and take a look at these conversations that match my prerequisites. So here we can see these bot conversations, and again, they look a little bit different than the conversations that we have with our agents, because bots will be displayed in purple, and then the customer will then be in gray. At any point in time, we can also review specific parts of the conversation, kind of like how we would with an agent handling the conversation. But this is how we would be, going on about the flow. But worth mentioning simply because, in case you want to review bots, that would be my best suggestion. And then if we wanted to take it a step further, we would simply, click the three dots here, click edit, and then turn it into an assignment, which will allow us to take these conversations and send them to our most relevant reviewers. So again, if you're familiar with assignments, fairly straightforward. But yes, this is another way to kind of add another layer to not only find the bot conversations, but then to also be able to take it a step further and have our reviewers take a look at the specific bot conversations. Now, since we're on assignments, I want to show you how we would leverage AI in the assignments. So let's just say we were looking at bot conversations over, a set period of time. Right now, it's saying there's 0 conversations that match. So maybe we'll find a bit more refinement when it comes to this particular filter in a quick minute. So let's go ahead and jump to reviewers and reviewees. So with setting up an assignment, we'll be able to define who gets those conversations. So maybe I just want myself and maybe Zach as well to get these conversations. We will also be able to define who's being reviewed. Again, because this is a bot assignment, we'll be able to select bots, and therefore it will just pick up on bots. Now we can see that it's gone ahead and refined the amount of conversations that are coming up based on my filters. Now moving on, with conditions in mind, right now I am just looking for the bot and where conversations come up where that bot is involved. But I can also leverage AI in other areas where, similar to how I would use the filters, I can bring in some custom categories. So those are the ones, again, that we built out. I can also use spotlights and custom spotlights if I wanted to maybe, take it a step further and add this additional layer of specificity. Just note, and as you may already know, each filter that we do add to this condition section will work as an and function. So you'll notice that there will be less and less conversations. So if, for example, here I'm trying to pick up on a bot conversation where maybe there's particularly an outlier, it may reduce it to 0 simply because there aren't any. But let's take a look. So yes, that's the case. But for now, again, we're just trying to find these bot conversations, and now we're leveraging the automation to have it sent to myself and Zach. One final thing we can look at here with the assignments is take a look at the goal, and then being able to define whether we can choose from this set of conversations or if we're automatically assigned conversations from this pool. Now, the thing is, because there are only 3 conversations appearing here, there isn't too many that I'm worried about. But if this was like a larger batch of conversations that we're pulling in based on the assignment, and maybe I wanted only 5 to be assigned to, Zach and I on a weekly basis, this is where we'd be able to define that. For now, we could say 100% simply because it's only 3 conversations, and I think that Zach and I will likely be able to handle the bulk of the conversations. We can also define the reviewee, but again, this doesn't really apply simply because we're looking at bots. The only time it would apply is if we were having multiple bots and maybe we wanted to define each bot getting a specific set of reviews. And this is where I would be able to do that. A few additional settings here where we can further define. Again, if we are specifying a bit further, this is where I, kind of add that additional layer, kind of like this, but just with the reviewer and then the reviewee specified in terms of the amount of reviews. And then we can also allow replacing of conversations in case say Zach gets a conversation that feels like isn't relevant to him, he would simply replace it by, being able to with this setting turned on. After I'm kind of happy with how this assignment is going to be set up, I'll take a look at the finalization and kind of the overall configuration. And then once I'm happy, I can go ahead and click create assignment. So now we've used the flow of taking a filter into an assignment, and now we can see this assignment exist. At any point in time, I can toggle this assignment off by marking it as inactive. I can edit it, duplicate it, or delete it as well. Now, what that would look like in terms of the automation or me being assigned the work to be doing these reviews on the bots, I would go into my tasks, which is, the work required of me, and I'll be able to see the assignment populate into here shortly. So let's take a look. Looks like it hasn't loaded yet, so we'll give it another refresh. Let's take a look here. Hopefully that comes up. Second. Our assignments have been a bit slow lately, so bear with us here. Hopefully that comes up soon. So there it is. Awesome. So then we would just jump into here, and then we would work from this flow where we would find those conversations that we specifically had assigned on, kind of an automated flow. And then I would come into my workday, take a look at this conversation, click review, and then go from here and then work my way into the review process. And then as we can see, the AutoQA has done some review on this conversation, and then we would take it and handle it like any other conversation as well. Now, the next step from here I want to cover is diving deeper into the AutoQA dashboard. So with dashboards in mind, I want to quickly mention, because this question has been coming up a lot recently, the QA data that we have is a result of everything happening in Zendesk QA, and doesn't necessarily go to Explorer currently. Hopefully, in the ideal state, one day we will have all the data in one place in Explorer. But currently, I would say leverage the dashboards because they can be very helpful, at least when handling QA and doing conversation reviews over time, whether it's manual reviews or automated AutoQA reviews, which we're going to dive into right now. Now, another thing I want to mention as a best practice slash tip when it comes to looking at our dashboards, there isn't a way to natively save current dashboard filters and views. So let's just say I, get pretty specific with my view. We'll select the workspace, and maybe we're looking at a specific reviewee. Let's just say the agent version of myself. And let's just say I wanted to come back to this on a daily basis, but I didn't want to set this up every single time. The best way to currently set this up is to save this as a bookmark. And then once I save it as a bookmark, if you're going to have a series of views, I would say build out a bookmark folder and then just come back to the view that you want whenever you need to, because it will save the URL. But again, currently within the app or the tool, there isn't a way to save it and come back to it. So that's the best way to do so in its current state. So I'll go ahead and refresh and reset the filters here just so we can begin to look at some data. And with the AutoQA dashboard, there'll be a few different things that are different than the manual reviews dashboard. So we'll take a look at, first of all, the efficiency gain. So this will show us how much more efficient the AutoQA has been in terms of reviewing conversations compared to our manual reviews over this period of time. At any point in time, I can click into a number that I can underline and drill into the conversations so I can take a closer look. While I'm here, I can also, jump around into the conversation and click into it if I want to. And I can also download this data into a variety of formats, as well as looking at some advanced data options when it comes to how we look at the data visually. Jumping back out, I'll explain a few of these different cards that we see. So the AQS, similar to the IQS, is the auto quality score. And what that is the average review score of all the reviews provided by the AutoQA. Now, the acceptance rate is how often we agree or disagree with the AutoQA. So I'd say any number over 80% is a good number. But if you see it dip below that, then that means that we're probably disagreeing with the AutoQA quite often, and therefore it's not really picking up on what we needed to pick up on. So then I would reevaluate and reconfigure some categories, or perhaps look at maybe specifying some more personalization with the AutoQA so that it picks up on exactly what you needed to, and hopefully gives you a better acceptance rate over time, because we want to ensure that it's picking up on the correct things that we need it to. And then we have some more bits of data here that we can see, again, comparatively to how we are reviewing our conversations. Now, the modified AutoQA conversations are anytime an AutoQA review is left, we can simply click into this, and then we would see which conversations we looked at and modified from what the AutoQA reviewed initially. Now, as we scroll down, we can see the AQS over time. So this is the auto quality score over time, and then we can see, how it's performed across different dates, and maybe if there's been a change in any of the trends here. And this would give us an indicator as to when that change happened, and maybe why, and maybe what set of conversations caused this particular dip in the data. If we're receiving conversations in a variety of languages, this is where it would be good to take a look and then jump into the deeper dive within some of this data. We'll get some category insights as well. So here we can see categories comparatively as to where we're doing better with the AutoQA. So let's just say right here, when we look at it, the acceptance rate for closing is pretty high. So that means we're typically agreeing with what the AutoQA is suggesting for the closing category. But yes, this is a really good indicator to see, again, which categories are performing better than others, and then maybe zoning in on specific ones to see where we can potentially improve our manual grading, or maybe where we need to take a closer look and not use the AutoQA so much as a guide because it requires maybe further or manual review. Some custom category insights. So again, as we begin to build out those custom categories, this is where we get some data around that. And this can be fairly helpful, again, with the personalization aspect of AutoQA. These are those prompt-based AutoQA categories that were built out, so we can see some data around that as well. So how often or how many reviewed conversations there were, as well as how many manually reviewed conversations. Let's just say we overrode them and then ended up leaving a manual review. That's where we'd be able to find those in here. So pretty important dashboards to come back to as you begin to utilize the AutoQA, and then maybe add the manual layer of review, or maybe you just want to take a closer look at some of the data that's coming in with the AutoQA. This would be a good place to come back to dive deeper. Some category scores over time. So here we can see some changes with the category scores, which again can be an indicator of maybe something that changed within our business and how the AutoQA was reacting to it or grading it accordingly. So something to come back to. And again, a cool visual to also see where we need to maybe focus in on in terms of enablement, or perhaps adjustments with the AutoQA. Some AutoQA conversations by category. So again, more category details with the AutoQA specifically. And then we can dive into reviewees as well. So then this can also be helpful when we're looking at the AutoQA, how it's grading our agents relative to one another. So if that ever becomes an issue, we can take a closer look and see maybe why it's grading certain agents lower than others. And again, also the ability to go down further, we can kind of take a look into kind of the closing conversations, some empathy focused conversations, and we can always drill into the data by simply clicking into the number. Root causes are also something we can take a look at when it comes to the AutoQA. Can be helpful to figure out, again, where those issues are coming up the most, and then ultimately taking these into conversations that are coaching focused with our agents, and then ultimately building some more enablement around those things that come up. So the AutoQA dashboard is something I definitely recommend coming back to, spending more time here as you begin to leverage AutoQA a bit more, especially when it comes to these new custom categories, as well as when it comes to saving time, just refreshing, every now and then and coming back to it to see if the AutoQA is doing what we need it to do and is reviewing things to the standards that we want them to be reviewed at. Now, I'll pivot over quickly to the bot QA dashboard. And since we covered bots earlier, I wanted to come back to the dashboard side of things, because as our bots begin to review conversations, data will populate into the bot QA dashboard. Now, where is that useful specifically? I'd say mostly around conversations that get escalated to our agents. So here we can see in the last month, we can see the bot only conversation rate. So that's again where just bots were involved. If those conversations are escalated to a human or one of our agents, we would be able to find those conversations in here. So again, if I expand the date range to maybe 12 months, I might be able to see a few conversations that were escalated to a human from a bot conversation. And then I can click into that, drill in, and then take a closer look at what those conversations were. Maybe download that data if I want to take a closer look externally. And then I can also figure out the workspace in which that bot was operating in case we are using different bots in different workspaces. So something to keep in mind. And then again, can be helpful to see how often our conversations are maybe going from bots to, a human. And then that can allow us to figure out, maybe where we can focus in on certain areas where maybe escalation is needed, or maybe where we need humans to handle specific types of conversations. Some more data here about sentiment that can be helpful to look at over time. And then again, coming back to this, we can click into this and drill down on those positive sentiment conversations to figure out which ones those were, and gives us an idea of where the bots, handle those types of conversations, and where maybe we can, again, prefer to have humans focusing on specific types of conversations that aren't so positive. So going beyond this, we want to cover the assignments dashboard. In here, as we begin to build out those assignments that I talked about earlier, we can take a closer look and see how these assignments perform over time. So maybe if I'm looking at this outliers assignment, I can find a few cycles that maybe seem relevant. So again, I'm randomly selecting a few here. But as these bits of data come in and as we complete our assignments, we can not only review how often we've completed the goal, but we can also begin to take a look at, the assignment cycles, who was involved, as well as how often those conversations were replaced. So I'm going to scroll down a bit further, and how often they were removed. So we can take a look at, maybe specific bits of data where that conversation was removed and why that was, and then maybe bring this up to the reviewer, and then have the discussion around maybe what conversations are more relevant to them. And then here we can get some reasoning as well. And then we can also download this data. And this again helps us not only refine how we configure assignments, but allows us to see where that's happening, and then taking a closer look when we need to. So after this, I want to pivot over to coaching, because I feel like I talked a bit about coaching and how that kind of feeds into some of the data that we have. And I think the perfect segue is to quickly go over this surveys dashboard, which is CSAT. And I want to talk about not only the dashboard because it's fairly straightforward, but these little pins here. These little pins allow us to bring in parts of the dashboard into a coaching conversation. So let's just say this is something I wanted to discuss with Abdullah as an agent in our upcoming one-on-one. I can go ahead and pin this card and then bring it into the one-on-one. So I can either click go to pins, which will take me to the pins under coaching, where I can see all these pins that I've previously set up. But then as I begin to build out one-on-one session, I can include this pin into the conversation. So here, again, as you saw, I can create a thread around some of these pins and maybe create some dialogue if I wanted to. But if I jumped into the session and built out a one-on-one session, let's just say again, with the agent version of myself, I'll go ahead and give it a name, decide when the coaching session is happening, and then I'll be able to bring in those pins, which you might be familiar with when it comes to conversations, but you can also do this with dashboards. So here we pin the dashboard, we pin the conversation, both of which we can actually bring into our one-on-one. So what this allows us to do, and let's just say this is not as relevant to an agent. Maybe you want to have this discussion with another reviewer. This is where this could be of value, because we can maybe discuss some data, discuss some things where, maybe CSAT is trending negatively or positively, and then maybe have a discussion around that. And then the coolest thing about this is we can track this over time and come back to previous conversations, and then maybe see if what we discussed in that one-on-one was something that contributed to a change positively. This is a way to kind of track it over time, but also create some dialogue around where we can provide training, enablement, and further deepen our conversations around QA. So with the coaching suite, once we're in a session, we can add talking points and notes. Another pro tip I like to talk about is leveraging templates. If you're not familiar already, this little button will allow you to bring in templates. For example, if we wanted to standardize our QA procedure, I would build out a template such as this action items one-on-one, and then have everybody, input it into their instances simply because templates are unique to each user. So to reiterate that point, if I wanted everyone to have the same templates, I would simply build them out offline and then tell everybody to add them into their instances. But you can also have private templates that you want to keep to yourself. But all I'm trying to get to is standardization of QA, and that can be helpful using templates. It can also save you a lot of time when it comes to the reviews or coaching sessions and so on. It can also give you a bit of a guideline on how to operate when it comes to navigating those sessions. So something to keep in mind. But as we move down a little bit further, we can create these action items that allow us to track different things over time. So maybe discussing dashboards is one thing that we want to bring up today. And then once we complete that, we can simply check it off. We can also add more action items. I'll dismiss that quickly, and then come back to these different topics over time and see how we've progressed. The personal notes section is also kind of neat because it allows me to come into a one-on-one prepared. And this segues really well into my next point, which is I want to talk about the agent view. And this allows us to, not only have areas where we can kind of come prepared to the one-on-one, and the agent also has this. It's just a way to kind of keep track of things for yourself as you begin to revisit some of these one-on-ones and see some things that maybe you just wanted to keep to yourself, or maybe some additional notes that you wanted to have that add more context around these one-on-one sessions. Now, since I did talk about discussing the agent view, I want to quickly jump into the agent view and show you what it looks like when it comes to reviewing conversations, or at least once you receive reviews as an agent. So I'm going to quickly open up a new instance here of my agent profile. So let's go ahead and do that quickly. So make sure it's sharing properly. So let's take a look at this. Share. Cool. So I'll go ahead and log into my agent account. And from the agent's point of view, you'll see that the view is a bit more limited when it comes to what the agent sees. And this is, mostly because the agent only really needs to see what's relevant to themselves. So we'll have dashboards at the top left-hand corner that are most relevant to the agent themselves. So this is where they'd be able to see, any bits of data around the work that they've done over time, all the reviews that they've received, and then kind of anything that has been disputed. But again, all of this will be revolving around the agent's conversation specifically and nobody else's. Now, the second bit is activity. So similar to how the reviewer would see this, any activity that is related to myself as the agent will feed into here. So if I collapse this, I'll be able to see everything that requires my attention. So here we can see that there was a previous dispute that requires my attention with a little one bubble. And then I'll be able to see, based on this dispute that I provided, what the status is on it, if it was rejected, and then why that is. Because at this point in time, as an agent, I wanted to dispute this review that I received, and then I, kind of gave reasoning for it, and then it got rejected with a comment from Nicholas here, discussing why that was the case. So this is pretty helpful, and the reason I cover the agent views, oftentimes a lot of reviewers will have an idea of what the QA process looks like from a reviewer point of view, but can have a bit of a limited insight when it comes to how the agent receives it. So this can be helpful to not only understand how the agent receives the feedback, but to see what they see and then kind of pick up on maybe how they're navigating the platform. From this particular view, as I click into the review itself, I'll be able to leave comments around this review if I want to discuss this dispute a bit further. Again, leveraging templates if I wanted to, or adding anything else that I think is relevant. I can also see the timeline in which things occurred. If I wanted to review the initial review, I can take a look here and then kind of go through it again. And then one thing I want to also mention is a question that comes up pretty often is, does the agent see the AutoQA review? And the answer is no, because as the AutoQA grades, it gives the reviewer a guide as to what their review should be. But until a manual review is left on the conversation, the agent will not see anything. So in this particular case, as I can see, I've left a review for the agent version of myself, and therefore this is why I can see this as an agent. Even though I may have followed what the AutoQA had initially, this is not visible to the agent until the review is submitted manually. So it's just something to keep in mind. If I jump into the info section, I can see a bit more data, kind of like I would as a reviewer, just around the conversation itself, if the metadata is relevant to myself. I can also kind of reference that as I need to, as well as be able to jump over to the original conversation on Zendesk. Now, finally, with the coaching section in mind, I'll have a slightly similar view to what's seen from the reviewer point of view. Any quizzes that I need to take will also be found here. But from a one-on-one standpoint, all my one-on-ones are right here, and I can click into it and then go through the flow of the one-on-one, similar to how I would as a reviewer. And again, personal notes section for myself, as I pointed out earlier, I'd be able to see any feedback I've received over time, similar to the reviewer, as well as any pinned conversations that have been pinned for me, as well as that dashboard I showed you earlier. So there's a reference point here based on the date and time range. So that's the agent view. Now, the one other thing I want to cover while we're here is the browser extension, because I feel like oftentimes a lot of the customers I work with will have multiple windows open and sometimes want to reference the Zendesk ticket as they're operating in QA. So what I think is really, really helpful is leveraging this Chrome extension. What it allows us to do is review from the ticket itself. Now, as you might already know, tickets are pulled into Zendesk QA every 4 to 6 hours from Zendesk. So sometimes that delay can, slow down a QA process. And if you want to stay on top of it, I think it's really beneficial to leverage the extension and have it allow you to do reviews on the go. So let's assume now we're working through an assignment flow, and I want to jump into the Zendesk ticket and take a look at the ticket in Zendesk and then do a review simultaneously. I'll quickly go into this assignments area. So again, you'll notice that this extension looks very similar to what you'd see on the review tab as you're reviewing a conversation. So let's just say I'm working in maybe the outliers assignment. I find this conversation. So by clicking it, it will take me to the Zendesk ticket. And this is, again, just to demonstrate not only being able to leverage assignments and use the extension for that, but to also show you that we can be on the Zendesk page and then be able to review this conversation simultaneously. So here, again, I'll be able to see the conversation as it came in. So the data here, the conversation, the chat itself, all the bits of data that come up here. So again, if this is in my way, because I'm currently on the laptop, I can move this around and then be able to look at other parts of the conversation. But as you can see, this is very familiar, kind of like you would see in the review tab. I can look at information related to the ticket. I can see the feedback. So again, the spotlight, insights, any previous reviews that have been left on the conversation. So again, we can see AutoQA has left its review, which is, again, not visible to the agent until I submit my manual review. And any other CSAT surveys that have come in. I can also change the workspace if I need to. But again, the most important thing here is being able to review the conversation. So kind of like how I would within Zendesk QA, I can simply review this conversation, again, follow the AutoQA guide, select the scorecard that I want to use, and then go from there and review the conversation, also leveraging templates or anything else that I typically would have access to in Zendesk QA. So something to keep in mind. Again, I also want to mention that it's probably worth checking in maybe with your IT team. Sometimes there are restrictions around extensions and so on, but if there are no restrictions, I'd say this is a very helpful and useful tool to streamline your review and QA process on the go while keeping things simple and straightforward.